We now proceed to our next presentation. I now invite Rafiq to introduce Mr. Aiyappa K.G.
Good afternoon, everyone. Aiyappa K.G, partner at One Law Advocates as a lawyer and now partner at One Law Advocates. He has more than 10 years of experience in handling complex and challenging criminal cases, especially in the areas of white-collar crimes, blue-collar crimes, anti-corruption, anti-drugs and narcotics, anti-sexual offences laws, false prosecution laws. He also has comprehensively dealt with criminal trials, bail, quash petitions, criminal complaints, writ petitions, check bounce cases, matrimonial cases, land-related cases with great severity and professionalism. On the prosecution side, he has appeared before courts and assisted leading central investigation agencies, including the CBI, NIA and special investigations teams constituted by the government of Karnataka in high-profile and sensational criminal matters, as well as in numerous other significant cases. On the defense side, he has successfully represented one of the principal accused in the widely published 2016 Karnataka second PU question paper leakage case, a matter that captured statewide attention. His approach to criminal law is rooted in empathy and diligence. He understands the anxiety and uncertainty that his clients face when confronting and pressing criminal offences, and he strives to provide them with unwavering support and guidance every step by step of the way. He firmly believes in the mantras that a case should not be based on race or public interest, but on case and motivates. He also has a passion for reading, writing, and networking in the field of law, as evidenced by his publications, honors, and languages. Welcome, sir. KG.
First, a warm welcome. I'm actually stuck between a rock and a hard place because of the insightful presentation of Ms. Sneha. Also, the amount of loopholes that has been brought up against criminal law by Vikas. So, I have two things to be addressed. Good afternoon to ladies and gentlemen and also others. Let me just start off. I will be focusing predominantly on the criminal law angle. Most of the laws and other compliances related to your association, your incorporations, etc. have all been dealt by Mrs. Sneha Nagraj, so I will not be left with anything more to answer. Now, when you talk about criminal law, I know a certain sense of fear that rips through all of us. The moment you say, oh, you're accused in a crime, there's an FIR registered on you, you always think that, oh, when I'll be arrested? When should I switch off my phone and become absconding? So these are the fears which a normal human being undergoes. The sole reason being your life, your liberty, your freedom that you've been enjoying all this while can be scuttled by a mere FIR registered by a police constable, let's say. So that is the power of criminal law. That is when it is so serious. That is when the power of jails and prison system, all your TV series that has been glorifying a lot of things will come into play. So now when you say criminal law, all of us I'm sure would have had some sort of exchange with criminal law. Maybe some of them have committed crimes, that's okay. We're all accused. Even if you're convicted, it's okay. You've done your conviction, you've done your time. There's always scope for reformation. Second is some people may have been victims of crime. I'm sure in this country, most of them would have been victims of crime in some or the other manner. Some of them could be just moral wrongs, but we consider that to be a criminal wrong in all of us. There are other people who I see a lot of trend, especially amongst the Gen Zs, where they're all fascinated towards true crime documentaries. So I always advise them, please don't be a character of true crime because you'll get caught in no time. So it may be all fanciful on your Netflix and other OTTs where you glorify all these serial killers. But in reality, moment you look at the overcrowded prisons of Parappanagrara, you will think twice before having any such thoughts in your mind. Don't think you'll be put in an orange jumpsuit. Only thing you'll get is an orange tie you can buy. Okay. Well, let me just start off with what is crime. Now, we all hear about this word crime, criminal offense. Oh, there's an FIR, there's a charge sheet, police is coming here, 3-star police, 1-star, 2-star, police constable. And of course, there are always allegations against the system. No doubt there are allegations, no system is perfect. Police system is also not far from it. So when you say crime, there are two essential elements. I will not be going to the legal Latin jargon, which will put you all into sleep. I will simply use two Latin words. One is mens rea, other one is actus reus. It's nothing. Mens rea is nothing but your mind, and your actus rea is just an act. So merely because you do something, an act that appears to be a crime, it need not classify under the definition of a crime. You should have the criminal intention. I'll just give you a brief example. Now you all finish this conference, you all go back on the road, and you keep walking towards Bishop Cotton School and further towards the Residency Road. There's somebody who's walking in front of you and he takes his hand, he slaps you. Okay, that is a crime according to you. I'm not trying to belittle it. Of course, it is a violation of your personal space. It could be stretched to the angle of assault. But there is a person, for example, he wanted to slap somebody else. Instead, he slapped me on the road. So there is a mistake of identity. So I didn't have the intention to slap the person who was walking there. Rather, he was targeting somebody else. Here, though slapping is a criminal offense, but you didn't have the intention to slap that person. So that you may have a defense of mistake of law. You can come under all this. So that is why I'm telling you all, not every act or an assault will amount to a crime. So these are two essential elements. Can we go to the next slide? No, previous one. As you can see from this slide, there are a few contentious photos I put up. I leave it to your interpretation what you want to do about it. It may be relating to existing cases, general cases that you all come across. One is, of course, your 112 vehicle. Anybody who's a victim of a crime, if you all think so, please call 112. This is the Karnataka State Police's number. A lot of people have the hesitance not to call for it. Nowadays, things have changed. They have also tried to become like 9/11 of the US. All of you are also used to US standards. You all think that, oh, police will never turn up. Of course, the police getting stuck in the traffic jam, that is different. Otherwise, they have a decent arrival time in terms of a ETA. Of course, sometimes there's VVIP movement, that is different. That is all part of the systemic errors, what we point out. However, nowadays, once you call the number 112, there has been quick response and reaction from the police. So anybody is a victim of crime, do not hesitate. Now I'll come back to the liabilities of RWAs, etc. But end of the day, who are RWAs? RWAs are nothing but people. So criminal law is concerned with people, and it is just not just entities alone. In other words, it's your criminal mind that matters. Second, of course, there are some disputes that always happens. And if you look at the other photo, is that dog issue, which everybody talks about. There's always, they say in Kannada, Prani Samrakshana Vedikegalu. That means the rights of the animal activists, etc. How do you draw the balance between animal activists and people who are not very activists in nature? They want to safeguard their own lives. So recently there have been a lot of interactions even in the courts. I think some of them have turned into some Instagram reels by Supreme Court. I reckon one of the Supreme Court judges clearly mentioned, what about the rights of the people whose children have been lost to dog bites? How do you look into that? So there has to be a balance that is being drawn. I understand the overwhelming love towards animal, all the other aspects which need to protect nature as it is. But at the same time, what about the victims who've been of dog attacks? So how do you answer these questions? And there are people who want to give biscuits to the dogs in the apartment complex. There are people who don't want to give. These are all issues, and there has recently been, BBMP is also going on a drive to capture, and I reckon they want to inject the dogs with something. I don't know what, it could be questionable. Maybe there'll be a scandal breaking out later on. Anyways, now the last photo, it's infamous car which was on the national news for quite some time. That is where the reason why I put up this photo is, now that incident happened, I reckon it was in Pune, and everybody was up in arms, the whole civil society, they were all shouting at the things, the system, how certain priorities have been given to the VVIP culture of this country, all those things. But again, even if you look at that incident per se, the reason why I put that photo is there will be certain acts which could be negligent, but you cannot say that because two people lost their lives, that they squarely come under the ambit of a murder. Murder is something that is a gravest form of a criminal offense, where you're taking away the life of an individual. Okay, there you need to have proper planning, you need to have intention to result in the death of the person. Here, it could be a case of probably grave negligence resulting in manslaughter. That is a famous American term that is used. However, he cannot be tried for the offense of murder for the sole reason that he didn't have criminal intention and there was no relationship between the accused and the victims. There's always some planning. That is how the mind of the criminal operates. These are all things. Okay, can we go to the next slide? Next slide. Okay, now coming back to the real material hand, regarding the criminal liability of an association and organization. Of course, Sneha did a beautiful presentation regarding under what provisions, be it the Karnataka Apartment Owners Association Act, the Societies Registration Act 1960, and subsequent other formulations such as the Companies Act. These are all the acts under which you can register your apartment owners association. Now, under the eyes of law, there are two things that goes about. One is your individual liability. Other one is a liability that arises of you being part of an entity. Now, when you say a company, the company exists throughout. Now, the company has its own liability. It's a juristic person under the law. Now, whenever you're saying a particular apartment association, office bearers of it are accused of a crime, the liability will fall subsequent to the liability of the association, because your individual liability, you have no individual liability per se. Your liability will get extended by virtue of the fact that you are an office bearer of the association. That is all. So without the association, your liability will be almost nil. Your liability will be the same of any member of the association. Now, can association be prosecuted for offences committed by office? Highly possible. It all depends on how, if the entire association is hand in glove in usurping certain funds that are there for the welfare and development of the association, then certainly all the members of the association can be prosecuted. However, if there are individual members who claim to have no knowledge about this whole misappropriation or diversion of funds, then you can be exempted from being prosecuted. Only we'll come to different options that are there. The principles of mens rea, guilty mind, and vicarious liability also apply. Now, like I clearly mentioned, there could be incident of fraud. When you say fraud, fraud is a very broad term. It may not include criminal fraud per se. It is also civil fraud, there is also criminal fraud. When you talk about criminal fraud, this is when you need to have intention to cheat right from the beginning. So that is a very high standard of proof that is required. Civil fraud, that may not be the case. Prima facie, if you see some form of misappropriation of funds, then civil fraud can be alleged. Okay, now coming to the process about how you will have to inform or take action if you come in knowledge of a crime. See, please understand, crime is something that affects the whole society. Now, the example which I gave you of you walking down the Richmond Road and getting slapped on the road, it may be a personal incident, but at the same time, that particular incident is against the whole society as a large. That is how civil wrongs are usually between two individuals. Here, you have a right against the whole world. That is how the law operates. There is a famous quote by, I think, one of the Supreme Court judges of United States. He says, your right will extend as much as you can extend your arm. So your right will stop once the other man's nose starts. So you can keep swinging your arm like this until it touches other man's nose. If that is the case, your right stops. Then you can be slapped on the back. So these are all examples. So that is when how your right really operates. Now, coming to the angles. Now, say one of you are victims of a crime, say in an apartment association. Let us assume a situation wherein a dog has bitten another resident. Okay. Now, this is a scenario where there are multiple avenues. Now, when you look at a dog biting a resident, can you all prosecute the dog? That is a fundamental question to be answered. Can you arrest the dog and keeping him in Ashok police station? Is that a possibility? Or can you arrest the dog owner and keeping him inside the jail? I mean, use his imagination. I leave it to. Also, I want to mention you can be interactive with me because I believe that interaction breeds discourse and it's a part of democracy. So let us do it. Okay. So anybody wants to stop me and contribute? You're free field. Can you all arrest the dog and keep him in? You cannot. Okay. Can BBMP arrest the dogs and put him in their? Impound the dog. Okay. All right. Okay, that's nice to hear varied answers. See, now when you say a dog is bitten another person, dog is not something that is capable of rights and duties. Only people who are capable of rights and duties is when their liberty can be curtailed. Now the dog is not aware that he should not be biting of its natural instinct. You cannot be telling the dog don't bite the other person. So when you come to that angle, that is the analysis why a dog cannot be arrested and put inside Ashok police station. However, the dog owner can be prosecuted. There are certain offences under the IPC. I will not go into the basic jargon. There it talks about certain dangerous animals which are left out. And there's always certain incidents you can say, oh, the dog was not given proper treatment, so I'm facing these kind of diseases. So you can always bring in your creativity to prosecute the dog owner. Okay. Now, when something like this arises, now somebody has been a victim of a dog bite in the apartment complex. About the dogs? Bylaws, usually bylaws is something regarding your compliances, etc. How to deal with residents, your payment of maintenance, etc. But dealing with the pets, you may say, but again, you cannot have a law which says that, okay, in case the dog bites, this is what the procedure. Because these are all untoward incidents. That's why criminal law is very uncertain. You cannot have a clause for every action that could take place in the future. You can't have a bylaw saying that, okay, if there is somebody smoking ganja in the apartment, what should be the next option? That cannot be done. Because these are all, that's when criminal law comes into play. Now suppose somebody has been a victim of a dog bite. Now you all intend to call the police. You'll call 112 and the police will arrive, and of course there'll be some discussion what needs to be done. And if a person who's been a victim of dog bite wants to file a complaint against the owner of the dog, saying that you've been negligent in handling your dog, so let me go file a police complaint. Now the police will say, okay, once the 𝗗𝗙 patrol vehicle arrives in your place, of course he'll say, sir, Bunny, we'll go to file police complaint. Let's go to the police. Then you'll start writing a police complaint. Police complaint is nothing but it's a mere narration of facts, what you feel like it is. It need not have law. Of course, when you engage lawyers, the law, that is different. But on the prima facie, once you are aware of certain, once you come in knowledge of certain crime, you can write down the narration of the facts. That is what is called a police complaint. Now, after the police complaint, it doesn't mean that the police will immediately start investigation. Moment the police complaint is received, the police has multiple options. He can do a basic inquiry whether this particular police complaint really warrants investigation or mere inquiry sufficient. I'll call the people and close the case. Or whether this particular case, if it involves investigation, that is when the police will register something called as an FIR, which is also called as a first information report. So a complaint is different from an FIR. When you say FIR, that is what gives the legal power under the law for a policeman to start investigating into an issue. It is not a crime, though it's called a crime number. It is not a crime per se. It gives the power to start investigating into a subject matter. Say here we are talking about dog bites. Okay. Now, one moment the FIR registered, now the police will draw an FIR. They'll mention the name of the victims of the crime. You'll also have columns of who's the suspected accused in the case. In India, we use the word accused. Suspect is somewhat similar to what is there in the US. And after that, he starts investigation. Investigation, in a nutshell to put it, it is just a collection of various materials. It could be video footage. It could be, nowadays all people are very fascinated by doing video for everything. So video footage is one of the crucial evidences. You have photographs and you have statements of individuals. These are all collection of various materials for an investigating officer. When I say investigating officer, it's a IO. It is the policeman. For a policeman to come to a opinion, okay, these are the materials I have collected and this is what constitutes the crime. In my opinion, this constitutes a crime. Hence, I am filing a charge sheet. So this is when you get charged under the police. When you say charge sheet, it is nothing but a collection of all the materials that has been done by the investigating officer, and he puts it all the materials such as your photographs, statements of people, witnesses, witness on the other side. He'll also examine separate independent witnesses. They are called punch witnesses who will be called into the spot while undertaking investigation, various steps. This is when a police files a charge sheet. Now, if the policeman thinks, okay, I've collected all these materials, in my opinion, it does not constitute any crime. That is when he'll file something called as, in Karnataka we call it B report, or also it's called a closure report. That is when there is no charge sheet. So you're not accused of a crime. Moment a charge sheet is filed, the next step is the job of the police is over. Now next he submits the charge sheet before a court of law. He goes, because here there is no concept of alternative dispute resolution in terms of crime. Crime it's always, it is against public policy against society. So it is bound to be tried by a court of law. Only in rare circumstances like your check bounds, etc., probably matrimonial offences, there can be some scope for compromise and ADR. Otherwise, when it involves grave offences, there is no concept of ADR because of the fact that it's against public society, public at large. Now it is placed before the court. Moment it is placed before the court, next the court steps in and the court starts its process of issuing summons to people who are accused of the crime. Then you have various options. Either you can, if your materials make out, you can go to the high court, you can go to the trial court. There are various options available. So that we will discuss later. Yeah, I'm talking about the appropriate means, that is going before the high courts in terms of quashing and things like that. Next slide. Okay, now I wanted to bring about certain real life incidents that has been plagued in the general apartment association and societies. So I'll try to, anything sir? Okay, so one incident is an incident of criminal negligence which all of us, especially people who are residing in apartment associations, apartment complexes are facing. I'll give an example of a pool incident. I will of course not take names because this is all in the news. You're all aware of it. Let us all ignore the names around it. Now this is an incident whereby a child drowned in a swimming pool. And after around 30 to 40 days, I believe the child's parents ended up filing a police complaint which was subsequently registered as an FIR, and the police filed a charge sheet also. The incident involves a child, 4-year-old or 5-year-old, I'm not sure about that, child drowning in the swimming pool, and the office bearers of that particular apartment association were made accused in the charge sheet. They were tried for, under the police, they were tried for culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. Subsequently, it was changed to a different offense under section 304A. That's what the court said. And they were all prosecuted. Of course, they went to the high court saying that, no, like I mentioned earlier, criminal offense involves an act as well as a criminal mind. All of them said, saying, no, we didn't have any criminal mind to result in the death of the child, and there are no bylaws which says that there should be a lifeguard in the pool at all times. So that argument was dismissed by the High Court, saying that, all right, we are not saying that you all have intention to result in the death of the person, but again, at the same time, this was a grossly negligent act. That is one of the reasons why the case got dismissed, and the charges were modified from one incident, one offense, to case of 304A. That is death by negligence. So when you say negligence, it is somewhat like a civil offense that is being given the colors of a criminal offense. But again, negligence do find mentioning in the criminal laws, so we cannot ignore it completely. Now, in a negligence, you may not have intention to commit the crime, but here the intention is slightly different. Here, you had knowledge that without there being a lifeguard by the side of the pool, this is the reasoning given by the court, there could be a catastrophic impact. If there is no lifeguard, if you make a statement such as saying that lifeguard is not required at the swimming pool, all the children, their lives will be in a vulnerable state. So when you're talking about children and when you're talking about swimming pools, the association members are to have those kind of lifeguards because these protocols were not followed. This is when the court said this is a case of negligence. Here, the intention is that knowledge that if you do not comply with this standard of having a lifeguard by the pool could result in that the lack of act of putting a lifeguard is what constituted negligence. On these lines, it was dismissed. I reckon subsequently it has been challenged before the Supreme Court. It's still pending, I'm told. Yes, sir. Okay. Okay. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Not from the association.
Certainly, I do agree. This is a brilliant argument that will work before the Honorable Supreme Court, hopefully. Now, when it is a good point, I'm not denying, but I do understand the frustration also because I also strongly feel that the law has been stretched a little far because of the guilty mind. Parents, of course, they have lost a child. Now, you cannot be booking them for this. There are a lot of other factors involved. It is just not law alone.
No, but it's my responsibility to keep my child safe. I
Certain.
cannot depend my child safety on others. Just by living in a society, I don't get a right to let my child do whatever I want. Even we have grown as a kids and our parents have taken care of us. So as a parents, it is their moral responsibility more than the association responsibility. Association can only guide and give directions and guidelines. And but they cannot reinforce, because the other part of the association becomes is, if association becomes strict, they'll say, who are you to stop my child? The same time the guard stops them, they'll say, the guard is stopping. Who is he? I'm paying for it. So it's a double-sided sword. So it should be the more of responsibility of the parents. What I think, people can debate on that. It's more responsibility of the parents than the association.
All right. See, my view to that is, ma'am, I'll just come to you. Just to try and, I'll try to answer your questions because a lot of these questions are like a sniper shot. I may not have all the answers. You may, the questions are sharp is what I mean. So what I'm saying is, when you look through that, through the prism of law, there is a test that is levied usually. It's called a causa causans test. So whenever there is a case of negligence, there should be an act that is being performed or negligent act. At the same time, there should be proximate link between what ought to have been expected and what is a negligent act. Once those basic parameters are satisfied, that is when a negligent act comes into play. Now, with your argument, obviously I do understand these are all regular discussions. People are always talking about rights. They are not concerned about duties. When you're all growing up as kids, I do understand more duties were there. Now people are more talking about their rights. They forget what the duties are. I do understand as a parent, it's their responsibility to look after the safety of the child. At the same time, as association members who have taken the responsibility of maintaining some angle of law and order and compliances within the association complex, you cannot run away from the duty of these kind of compliances that is expected to have, which ought to have prevented negligence. That is how they look at it. Now it is like this. Now there is a police in place in the system, correct? Now police are expected to prevent crimes, but there have been instances crimes keeps happening. But you can't say that, no, it's a duty of the police. A lot of times you'll see police also coming forward and telling, they always do that victim blaming, especially on women victims. They always say, why do you go late at night at 1 a.m.? So that is always, those kind of narratives are always there. So what I mean to say is, in a way, when the association themselves have taken the responsibility of maintaining some form of certainty, law and order in the society, they are in a way responsible. Like I told you, the responsibility lies because of them being office bearers of the association, not because they're individually liable. So that is why the negligent act is slightly different from a criminal act per se. Yes, sir.
No, I agree to it. But the other part of it is, if the association keeps increasing the maintenance cost, those parents will only come back to the association asking for a reduction in the prices.
Okay, that question will be answered by Sneha Nagaraj. You can cancel it. Okay, I'm here to talk about crime. These are all different plausibilities. I'm not saying this is bound to happen. But at the same time, when you are managing things, etc., of course, it's a battle of egos, like Mr. Vikas also mentioned. That will also lead to a dispute. You can probably engage COD, court services to answer this particular issue as well. Now, what I mean to say is, okay, we'll come when he's arrested. All right, I think Madam has had a question here.
Fountain. It was the water wasn't even that high. She was electrocuted. That's how she died. She was 10 years old. So the whole judgment went on and on about the pool and possibility of lifeguards and things like that. No lifeguard could have stopped her from being electrocuted. That's not the function of a lifeguard. So it just seems to me again and again when I read the judgments, the judges seem to be so far removed from the realities of RWAs, how people actually live and what really goes on. It reminded me of a case of there was an epidemic of suicides in one of the IITs, and the decision they came to was to remove the fans. So it seemed like that. It made no sense. And if the office bearers are responsible when someone dies because they're electrocuted, then isn't the government responsible for any number of people who are dying outside? And any day, I would trust my RWA to keep me safe. I can walk every day at midnight, and I know I'll be safe. That is not true of my country. It's true of my RWA. So I don't understand.
I
what
understand.
basis.
Madam, let me just try to put this. Of course, it's a judgment. We are all free to criticize it in a manner that is not contemptuous in nature. Otherwise, criminal contempt will get attracted. Okay. You are all allowed
That's
to
your
discuss
problem.
about it. No, what I'm saying is, of course, the judgment, I do understand certain aspects we're missing. The state, no, let me finish. But again, we're all being watched. Please understand. But if you're using a phone, you've been watched and heard, so be careful about it. No, I mean just a lighter note. All right, certainly. We'll have a beautiful defense
I'm
when contempt
genuinely
notice gets
trying
issued.
to understand because when I read the judgment, when I read the media reports, it made no sense. And because I was president then, I know my father thought every day that I would go to jail. So when my tenure ended, it was literally so my dad wouldn't die of stress. So since you are here and talking about this, I really want to understand on what basis they just go off on a tangent when those aren't even the facts of the case.
Okay, madam, let me just try to bring about little bit of legal prospects here. The reason being, the judgment we were talking about was something called as a quash petition. So when you say quash petition, these are not cases that are being decided entirely on disputed facts alone. This is on the prima facie understanding of a law. This is somewhat like a bypass that you have under the law before you could go under a full-fledged trial. Now, I do understand with regard to what the gentleman over there in the back mentioned regarding these nitty-gritties, whether 4.5 meter pool, lifeguard, etc. All these are all factual defenses that are available when you're doing a full-fledged trial. There's a difference between a trial and some proceedings under a quash. Here, it's only a prima facie reading of the material which may result whether offense is committed or not. That is all it is. I'm sure there is more jurisprudence to that, but my answer to this question is it was limited material with regard to charge sheet materials alone. There is not a trial. He will not be pronounced guilty tomorrow. Even if the case gets dismissed, you have an option to fight your case before the trial court. For that, you have to come to the criminal court. You will be made an accused. You will have to do your cross-examination, what you all of you see on TV. That is what a full-fledged trial. That is when you can bring about all your defenses. Electrocution, the lifeguards, the bylaws, etc. So I do understand the frustration about how things are. I also believe in the approach of what Chanakya once mentioned in 𝗓𝗏. He mentioned that if government is promising security, if every theft that happens, the government has to compensate for the theft that has been conducted. Because the government said that they will take care of law and order of this area. Now, if you start filing cases, the whole government will run into bankruptcy, especially the present government.
They're listening.
All right, now another, yes.
Question number one is it possible for Resident Welfare Association members or the executive committee of the RWA to protect themselves from criminal liability by, some kind of a, I don't know what you call that, either through bylaws or through some other device, so that, for other than blatant malafide, they cannot be prosecuted. That is question number one. And the second one is in the case of this criminal law, which you just mentioned, is it possible for the complainant to withdraw the thing because you have been able to settle the matter out of court? Two questions.
All right. The first question, with regard to having full-fledged preventive measures, in criminal law, usually the preventive measures are unheard of usually, because crime comes into play once you commit a crime that is, rather, what do you say, there's a violation of a criminal offense. So it is because it's based on a mind of an individual. That is when you cannot have liabilities, especially with regard to criminal law, being boxed into certain areas. In civil, you can say, okay, if I don't pay a certain amount of money within 3 months, this is the interest that will be levied on you. But that's not the case with criminal law. Criminal law, the liability will always be stemming from the fact that it's regarding an intention of an individual. An intention cannot be prevented. And this is, we should always look at the extremity of the situation. That's why criminal law is always the last recourse. Your liability will not come immediately. Rather, it's only if there's an intention to commit crime is when your liability gets attracted. Now, regarding the second question with regard to withdrawal of criminal cases. Now, of course, there are a lot of options where you can compromise upon a criminal case. But again, the courts have also come down and there are certain parameters to be followed while you try to compromise. Of course, India is not Pakistan, so there's no concept of blood money. In Pakistan, you can commit murder on another individual, pay some 5 lakh rupees and close the case. Okay, that is not, we have not reached that, hopefully. So, or there's no compromise by doing something that is nefarious. You can do compromise of cases where there is no death involved. When I say death is an extremity, in cases of death, there is no concept of compromise, such as, say, somebody is going on the Mysore-Bangalore highway and there's an untoward incident of an accident happens, ended up killing another person, a two-wheeler on the road or something like that. Though there was no intention to kill that person, it's an accident, so it's a negligent case, no doubt. But again, there cannot be compromise before a court of law. You will have to fight the case full-fledged to show that there was no negligence on my part. That is how you win the case. Only in terms of death, when an incident involves death, there is no compromise. Other incidents such as your misappropriation and matters that are smaller, matrimonial offenses, here compromise can be done, worked out. But depends on what is the forum that will do the compromise. Usually the higher courts intervene in compromise matters involving money or any form of matrimonial related offenses, check bounce cases, all this can be compromised. But in a nutshell, when it involves case of death, there is no compromise. I hope I've made that clear. Okay, now the second issue, I think a lot of apartments would be facing with regard to certain pungent smelling noise coming out from flats which are usually inhabited by bachelors. That is that is usually the word in the apartment corridors. Of course, yeah, when we talk about consumption of any form of drugs, that is a punishable offense, no doubt about it. And certain times after consumption of certain nefarious drugs, there will be a lot of sound also that will be coming out. That is also a violation of Noise Regulation Act. Now, when you come across issues like this, the best way is to report to the police at the earliest, because you all don't want to get your hands dirty. Because sometimes being complacent to crimes also may show collusion on the part of people who are not reporting crimes. Especially these kind of issues when we are saying that, okay, it's okay, boys are doing it, let them be. But at the same time, if it becomes excess, please ensure that you report to the police and let's go against the fight, make this country drug free. That's what I believe. Next is misappropriation of association funds. Now, of course, all of you are running these office, the association bodies involving money, obviously. Now, when it comes to managing funds, of course, your CAs, etc., would have gone to the nitty gritty of it. But when you suspect that certain amount of money is being misappropriated, usurped, or it's been diverted to some wrong elements, it is always best that you initiate some form of action. Because certain aspects of fraud, I'm talking about criminal fraud, especially when there is a lot of diversion of funds to some questionable entities, that is when you'll have to raise your concern. Of course, I'm sure a lot of these AGMs, etc., will talk about where the money is being spent and a lot of discourses that happens in all these AGM meetings. But at the same time, if you all suspect that this is being used for criminal processes, please do raise your voice. And the same process is filing a police complaint if you all suspect somebody. But again, the whole association, if you're all, if everybody is doing it together, then of course the members, you're answerable to the members. Anybody can file a criminal complaint. There is no bar. That is one thing I want to mention here. Just because you don't think that you don't have locus standi. Civil case, that's not the case. Only if you are personally affected is when you raise a civil action. Criminal case, any person, even a person, say a person who's doing ironing outside the apartment, if he comes across certain crime in your association, he can raise a hue and cry. There is nothing stopping you. Of course, he'll lose it on business later. That is different. What I'm saying is, there is no locus standard to filing crime. If you think that you've been cognizant of any form of crime, you are allowed to raise alarm and file a complaint and subsequently defend. Yeah, there are some violations, statutory violations, which usually apartment associations face in with regard to getting notices from BWSSP and not following the compliance of your sewage treatment plant and some BBMP bylaws. Of course, see, these are all offences that will obviously have civil liability. On top of it, you'll have offence and penalties clause, which may attract punishment on the office bearers who were managing the affairs at that time of the incident. Now, most of these cases, what happens, it may not be a direct police complaint. You will be given a show cause notice, and if the authorities such as the BWSSB or the BBMP comes to a conclusion that prima facie a criminal case is made out, they can go and initiate something called as a private complaint. When I say private complaint, it is different from a police complaint. Here, the authority investigating may be police or may not be police. This is a complaint where you directly go file before a court of law. Like I'm sure if you have been very active in your association, some of you have been victims of defamation cases. There are two kinds of defamation cases. One is your civil defamation case where you seek for compensation. Other one is criminal defamation case. You can file criminal defamation case not before a police, rather you can only file it before a court of law. Because when you talk about defamation, though criminal defamation, when you say it's against the whole society, at the same time the victim is only you. When you have a personal victim that may not affect other person, that is when you go before a court of law and you file your private complaint and subsequent evidence is being led, and you would have got summons from the court of law saying that yeah, you've been accused of defamation case. And also defamation case, it takes a long time because of the systemic approaches and other lapses in the system. However, people who've been affected in terms of defamatory content being put on WhatsApp, certain discourses, discussions happen. There have been instances where people have been made accused, like Mr. Ruka said, a lot of battles of egos amongst association members. And they want to go, they say, go all out to get this person. It is not, they're ready to spend multiple lakhs of money even on lawyers just to ensure that a notice goes from it. Of course, there are options when you get a notice immediately from the court of law. There are different options where you can bypass going to the court, go to a high court, get an order of stay. There are various options and get it quashed completely. Because there's always that balance between what is free speech and what is defamatory speech. That lines are always blurred. Certain times innuendos are considered to be part of defamatory speech. Sometimes it is not. It is just told the intention, there was no intention, though there was an act. We can always say that I didn't have intention to mean certain manner, to make it offensive. So under these circumstances, you all can go to the court, you can go to the high court. These are various options before the court. Noise complaints. I'm sure all of you all have been victims of noise, especially loud music during Dasara, maybe other times also, Saturday nights. These are all very common complaints. Friday, Saturday. Oh, okay. bachelors. Okay, we can't stop the bachelors from existing, but we can try about addressing them. Of course, your bylaws will talk about all this, no doubt about it. But at the same time, police intervention can be called for. The gentleman at the back is very concerned about noise. You can always call the police, they will take action. And probably they'll warn them, and maybe they'll bring down the noise of the music. Of course, the noise regulation has different parameters on how you measure the decibel levels, 55, 60. There are various rules that are governing. But again, it is not easy to take action. They'll always take action like a negligence. There is a mischief offense which is beyond 50 rupees. They're all offenses that are usually. Usually, if you call the police and bring them to the flat, they will ensure that the police will ensure that the noise complaints are addressed. Otherwise, if you'll have a staunch association, make it a very stringent norm to have music, because the law says you cannot have loud music outside in public beyond 10 p.m. up to 6 a.m. These are all as per the Noise Regulation Act. Of course, there are during certain occasion, certain exemptions can be made for Diwali, Dasara, etc. Yeah, defamation, I reckon we already addressed about defamation. Next slide. Okay, now offense. What are the recourses available to a victim to file a criminal case? Like I clearly mentioned earlier on, once you're a victim of a crime, you can file a police complaint. If the police do not take any action on anything, you can go to a court of law and file a private complaint. Or in between, you can even go to a higher police officials to file this complaint. It could be anything. Like I told you, no crime is simple and small. Of course, crimes of murder, money laundering, these are all high extremities. However, even if you think that your rights have been violated, your space have been infringed, you have the option under the law to go file a criminal case. Like I clearly mentioned about misappropriation and diversion of funds by members, it is always essential that you, when you talk about bringing about the aspect of criminality in diversion of funds, it is essential that you be the first person to inform it. Otherwise, there will be questions asked on those people who are also not part of the crime. They usually, when a crime happens in a particular set of office bearers, the fingers are usually pointed towards every member of the office bearer. To avoid doing that, anybody who wants to be a whistleblower of sorts, he has to bring about the crime and bring it to the notice of everybody else. Yeah, I think dog attacks we've already covered. And online defamation, of course, if there is anything defamatory in nature, there's always a high chance of the whole being, even if it's part of free speech, you'll end up saying it's defamatory because your ego has been hurt. Now, there are laws under the Information Technology Act, the cyber laws, which also covers these kind of aspects. Of course, there's also option to resolve these disputes under various ADR, etc. But again, if anybody feels that he's a victim of cyber crimes, he has to go. Yeah, because reputation matters quite a lot. Next slide.
I have a question on dog bite.
Yes.
If the street dogs that come into the apartment complex, and if they bite any of the residents, then can we take action against the BBMP officials?
Yes, it is possible. The long arm of the law provides for it, but it'll be a tough time finding who the required authority is, who's responsible for management of that.
No, but humor aside, like what do associations do in a situation like that? Because the BBMP norm says that once street dogs come inside your complex, you can't throw them out. You have to keep them in the complex, feed them, etc. And like you already said, not everybody feels the same towards animals.
Certainly.
And if there's a situation of dog bite, right, by the street dogs, then how do complexes manage? Because this is a real problem that a lot of apartment complexes are facing today.
I'm told BBMP has a special helpline. I believe it's a forest department or the wildlife helpline or something. If they can be called, they will be able to assist. This is what I've heard in practicality. In terms of legality, I mean, there is no law which says that you cannot entertain them or you have to throw them away. The best way I would personally feel is to inform the wildlife helpline of BBMP so that they can, I think the lady here has a question. Yeah.
Animal Husbandry Department of the now I think after the Supreme Court ruling, you can inform the animal husbandry department of that ward. They will send the people to catch that dog and take it away and put it in the, they have a animal holding, to watch that dog. You can make a report.
Yes, sir. No, it's okay. You don't need a mic.
They watch a dog for a week and they leave it to the same habitat.
Yeah, if it is,
So the
no, if it is a dog that has bitten someone, they normally keep it in the pen.
no,
Nowadays.
this is a 100%.
But you can raise an objection.
Yeah, because it is actually happening where the people are getting bitten by the dogs, and when you call the BBMP, because we try to help BBMP meetings with NGOs and other stuff, it cannot be, because it's such a chaos that people are really not able to understand what to do. So in one of the projects where we have made an area where they have kept the dog and they are feeding it and they are not allowing it to come out. To that extent, people were paranoid. So BBMP, I'm sorry, they are not helping us. They just take the
But
dog.
what ward is it?
Mahadevpura. Yeah, Mahadevpura.
Mahadevpura. Mahadevpura, which ward? Udi. Varatur. Okay, Varatur, then you
Maybe I think if
talk
the
to
lady has some
doctor.
influence, they can use that. See, like I said, if the cats are causing the trouble, the owner of the cat can always be made liable. Stray cats. Oh, okay. It'll be a tough time finding the owner. Anyway. Yeah, she may have some ideas which may be questionable. Anyways. Monkey. Okay. Okay, regarding monkeys, you should be careful because they come under the Wildlife Act. So you'll be booked under both the acts, not just beehive. Honeybees. Okay. Pigeons. All right, all right. Just moving on. Now that we're discussing about the dog issue, I remember dealing with an issue a few months ago. The same issue with regard to certain population of the apartment rather, liking feeding the dogs, some objecting to it. So there was an incident. I will not mention the place because it may be in the newspaper. There was an incident where there were certain inhabitants who wanted the dogs to be away, the street dogs, and there was one lady to speak. So she was keen to feed the dogs, and because there was objections, the lady ended up filing certain criminal cases, saying, "Oh, this is what has happened. I was spoken of badly. I was mansplained and things like that." And there was a case registered on all these members, and they were absconding for a few days until they got bail. So that is when I'm coming to the misuse of the law part. There are chances of people, not just this incident, other people also misusing the law so that it can be used as a arm twisting tactic to get what you wanted, especially going for your interest of feeding the stray dogs. So this is an example. Now, when you talk about this false prosecution, yes, sir. The objected. Else you would have been booked under Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. Yeah, that's why. That's also one of the things. Please install CCTV cameras everywhere, every nooks and crannies. I'm sure all of you are doing it. Now, when you talk about false prosecution of laws, false misuse of laws, of course, the law is very new in India. It was always in existence. It has never been enforced. You all would be hearing about a lot of incidents of misuse. Obviously, the law specifically says that whoever feels that they've been wronged in terms of misuse, and the police also comes to a conclusion that this is not a case which could have been filed. there are different provisions under the IPC and the latest BNSs where you can prosecute the individual for offences, something called as offences against public justice. So it's a time-taking process. You'll have to file through a private complaint, or you can file it through the police if the police is not cooperative. So there is an option where you can go on a counter-offensive. You need not be on the defensive mode always. If you think that you've been wrong, don't sleep over your rights. Only if you sleep over rights, you can never be woken up, they'll say. So you take action if you feel like you've been wronged, so that you set a precedent to others also who are misusing laws like this whenever incidents arises with regard to dog feeding and other issues. Yes. Yes. Um. Hmm. Yes. Hmm. Okay. So that's a very precarious situation, I would say. There's always that fight between your freedom and greater social security at large. And if you look at certain nitty-gritties, you'll always feel that, of course, privacy is important. I'm not denying that. At the same time, for the greater good, that is why we have laws in this country or anywhere across the world. The law of social contract, they say. That means all of us have given up a certain set of liberties so that we all can live harmoniously. This is what see, you're sitting next to a gentleman there. See, you have maintained each other's privacy, but at the same time, you have given up certain aspects. Like when you go on the road tomorrow, you cannot be driving on the opposite side of the road. Now, when you get out of this hall, you have to certainly go on the right hand side. You can't go on the opposite direction. The reason why I'm not doing it is because of the fact that I've given up my right of way to go however I want, so that the larger social security can be managed. So that I feel you can have proper debates in your association and come to a consensus, which is better for the association, for the welfare of the association, whether installing those CCTV cameras or at certain times you can switch it off. But again, when you talk about surveillance, there's always a question of privacy that hinges upon. I believe recently the debate is regarding installation of the 𝗔𝗶𝗍𝗃 app of the central government. Though they say the government is listening, etc. These are all some allegations, but for the greater good, for security, to prevent future terrorist attacks, there's always a state looking into it.
Last
Yes.
question from the online audience.
Oh.
So it's, how do you keep yourself sane on your mind in peace, seeing so many crimes, or always contemplating the intent of the criminal?
Can you repeat the question?
It's, how do you keep yourself sane on your mind
Oh,
in
it's a
peace?
personal question.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the answer, it's a typical question every criminal lawyer gets asked. For that, the answer is, I'm just doing my duty as to what the law says, and I've taken an oath which says that I look at the motives, I look at the representing the interests of a client. That is all. I do not take things personally. That is when you have peace of mind. Huh? Nembadi. Correct. All right. Any more questions? All right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for the comprehensive presentation. Now I request Mr. Abu Bakar to present the sapling.